Ava used to think love was supposed to feel safe. But for the last 2 years, it felt more like surviving a war she never signed up for. Her husband, Ethan, wasn't cruel in the way people imagined cruelty. There were no bruises, no yelling matches echoing through the walls. Instead, there were the silences. The deliberate avoidance. The way he dismissed her concerns like they were childish complaints. And the looks, that chilling kind of stare that made her feel invisible in her own home. Their marriage had once looked perfect from the outside. People envied them. A decent house. Careers. Smiles at dinner parties. But behind closed doors, Ava was shrinking. Every argument twisted into a reflection of her flaws. Every attempt at communication ended with her apologizing, even when she had nothing to be sorry for. The emotional wear was quiet but constant, like water slowly eroding stone. She wasn't sure when it started, but she knew one thing: she didn't feel like herself anymore. She tried. She asked him to go to therapy. He agreed once, then never followed through. When she brought up feeling neglected, he told her she was too sensitive. That she needed to be stronger. That not every husband was a mind reader. She swallowed her pain for months, then years. She questioned her expectations. Was it her? Was she broken somehow, too needy? Friends started noticing. Not all of them, but the real ones. "You don't laugh the way you used to," one said. Her sister pointed out how she tiptoed around Ethan in conversation. Ava brushed it off. She had to. Because to admit something was wrong meant facing the possibility that everything she'd built was a lie. One night, Ethan came home late, as usual. No explanation. He dropped his keys on the counter, barely looked at her. She asked if he wanted dinner. He grunted. She told him they needed to talk. He rolled his eyes. The conversation turned sour within minutes, his voice flat, cold, condescending. "You're always complaining. You went from being fun to being this constant drain," he said, eyes never leaving his phone. Something cracked inside her, not a snap, not anger. Just quiet clarity. The next morning, she booked a weekend trip. Just 2 days. Nothing dramatic. No threats. No ultimatums. She needed space. She left a note on the fridge, just in case. "I'm taking the weekend for myself. I'll be back Sunday night. We need to talk." Simple. Neutral. On the drive out of the city, she kept thinking maybe this break would fix something. Maybe Ethan would notice she was gone. Miss her. Realize something. She wasn't asking for flowers or grand apologies. She just wanted to feel like she mattered again. But even as the wind brushed through her open car window and the miles put distance between them, she couldn't shake the heaviness. The guilt. Had she done something wrong? Was she giving up too soon? And then another thought crept in, unwelcome but persistent. What if he didn't care she left? That weekend, Ava sat alone with her thoughts more than she had in years. No passive-aggressive sighs from across the room. No feeling like she had to perform happiness. She watched the ocean for hours, not looking at her phone. And in that silence, something strange happened. She felt peace. An unfamiliar, aching kind of peace. It didn't come with answers. Just space. She thought about the girl she used to be before marriage. The one who painted at midnight, who laughed at her own jokes, who used to dance in the kitchen barefoot. Where had she gone? Slowly chipped away, piece by piece, in the name of compromise. By Sunday, she missed the idea of coming home to someone. But she didn't miss Ethan. Still, she packed her bag and headed home. She wasn't ready to end it. She wasn't ready to stay either. But she thought they could have a real conversation. Something honest. When she walked into the house, it took her 10 full minutes to realize what had happened. It was too clean. The kind of clean that meant something had been erased. Drawers slightly open, closets empty, shoes missing. His cologne wasn't in the bathroom anymore. Neither were his shirts, his chargers, his books. Then she saw it. A message on her phone, time-stamped early Sunday morning. A single line. "Don't try to find me. This is best for both of us." Her hands trembled. She read it again. And again. It didn't feel real. She tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Texted. No response. She called his brother. He hadn't heard anything. His mother was vague and cold, clearly coached. That was the moment it hit her. This wasn't impulsive. He had planned this. Not just the leaving, but the disappearing. Ava sat on the floor, phone in her lap, trying to breathe. Her thoughts raced. Was it punishment? Was it cowardice? How long had he been preparing for this? And how could he walk away so cleanly, without a word, without looking back? The pain wasn't loud. It was hollow. Numb. Like standing in a burned house and realizing the fire was gone but nothing was left. This wasn't heartbreak. It was erasure. She didn't cry at first. She didn't scream. She just sat there, trying to remember the last time Ethan had truly looked at her. Not through her. Not past her. But at her. She couldn't remember. Eventually she stood up, wandered into the bedroom, and lay down in the cold silence of her own bed. And then, finally, the tears came, not for him, but for the years she lost trying to be someone worth staying for. She had walked away for just one weekend. He had been waiting for the perfect moment to disappear. And he never looked back. Ava sat in the silence of her living room, heart pounding against the walls of her chest. Every inch of the house screamed abandonment. She walked through it like a ghost, touching the spaces Ethan used to occupy. His favorite chair gone. His shaving kit from the bathroom counter gone. Even his stupid keychain she used to hate was missing from the hook by the door. It wasn't just that he left, it was how meticulously he erased himself from their shared life. She scoured the house looking for a letter, a note, anything beyond that cold, heartless text. There was nothing. Not a hint of goodbye, not an explanation, not a trace of the man she thought she knew. Panic and betrayal twisted inside her like a knife. She opened drawers, checked closets, flipped through documents, but he had even taken the marriage license. She found a few bank statements left behind and noticed transfers, large ones, moved out of their joint account weeks ago. Her breath caught. He hadn't just left on impulse. He had been planning his escape long before she packed her weekend bag. Her mind raced backward, sifting through memories, trying to find the moment it all started falling apart. There wasn't just one. It had been dying a slow, invisible death for years, hidden beneath small betrayals and colder nights. She thought back to how he stopped celebrating their anniversaries, stopped asking how her day was, stopped reaching for her hand in the dark. She thought of how often he canceled plans with weak excuses, how many birthdays he forgot. She remembered dinners eaten in silence, kisses that felt like obligations, hugs that felt like dismissals. It had been happening piece by piece, death by 1,000 cuts. And she had clung harder every time, thinking love meant holding on even tighter when someone was slipping away. She realized now it was never about her failing to love him enough. It was about him not loving her at all anymore, and lacking the courage to say it out loud. She stared at her phone, debating whether to call him one last time. To demand answers. To scream. To beg. But something stopped her. A deep, instinctive voice inside whispered, "Don't give him another piece of you." Instead, she sat down, pulled a notebook from a drawer, and started writing, not to him, but to herself. She wrote every cruel word he ever said that she had excused. Every moment he made her feel small. Every time she compromised her happiness for the sake of keeping the peace. As the pages filled, the truth became undeniable. He hadn't abandoned her in one weekend. He had been abandoning her every day. He chose silence over conversation, dismissal over affection, apathy over effort. The realization didn't soften the blow. It sharpened it. But it also stripped away the illusion she had been clinging to, the lie that their marriage was just struggling. It wasn't struggling. It had been rotting from the inside out. She thought about the times she had blamed herself for his mood swings. About the hours spent wondering if she was too needy, too sensitive, too much. How he had slowly conditioned her to think that needing kindness was asking for too much. How she had learned to celebrate the bare minimum, grateful for crumbs of attention. Sitting there with those memories laid bare, she felt an anger she hadn't let herself feel before. Not rage at Ethan, but anger at herself, for how long she accepted less, for how deeply she believed that being half-loved was better than being alone. The anger burned hot, but behind it, something else flickered: resolve. She spent the next few hours methodically gathering the remnants of him he had failed to take. An old sock under the bed. A photo buried in a drawer. A jacket hanging forgotten in the hall closet. She packed it all into a box without ceremony, without tears. She set it by the door, not knowing if he'd ever come for it, not caring if he did. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about her. As night fell, Ava stood by the window and watched the city lights blur into one another. She thought about the dreams she had set aside, traveling alone, painting without worrying about what someone else would think, living freely without walking on eggshells. For the first time in years, those dreams didn't feel foolish. They felt possible. Ethan's absence was a wound, but it was also a clearing. A brutal, unforgiving clearing that left space for something new. She thought back to their early days, how he made her feel like she was the center of his universe. How intoxicating it was to be chosen. How quickly that center shifted the moment she stopped being easy, agreeable, convenient. How quickly love turned conditional. She realized love shouldn't have expiration dates based on convenience. Real love should have been steady, not transactional. Should have been patient, not petty. Should have been a home, not a battleground. For the first time, Ava admitted the truth she had buried for too long: she deserved better than what she had been settling for. The ache of loss didn't vanish, but she wasn't afraid of it anymore. She would carry it, heal around it, grow stronger because of it. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Because there was no one coming to save her. Not friends. Not family. Not Ethan. Only her. She set an alarm for the next morning and, for the first time in a long while, slept without the hollow weight of hoping someone would choose her. She already had. And that choice would be enough. Even if it had to be made from the ashes he left behind. 3 weeks passed without a single word from Ethan. No messages, no explanations, no signs of remorse. Just a gaping silence that confirmed what Ava already knew: he was never coming back. At first, she kept expecting something, even if she didn't admit it to herself. A letter. An email. Some excuse masquerading as closure. But as the days dragged on, the truth settled into her bones. He didn't leave out of confusion or emotional weakness. He left because he could. Because she gave him so many chances that he started believing she'd always forgive anything. That belief ended now. She found herself going through waves, one moment calm and detached, the next overwhelmed by questions with no answers. But the difference now was, she let herself feel them. She didn't suppress the grief, didn't sugarcoat the betrayal. She stopped trying to fix what wasn't hers to fix. Every time her thoughts spiraled into, "Why wasn't I enough?" she reminded herself of something powerful. Being treated poorly doesn't reflect your worth, it reflects their character. She poured herself into routines. Not as a distraction, but as a declaration. Morning runs. Cooking again, just for herself. Reading books she had forgotten she loved. Reconnecting with friends she had distanced herself from during the marriage. She told them what happened, not to seek pity, but to stop hiding behind the illusion of a life that didn't exist. There was shame in the beginning, but it didn't last long. Because each time she spoke the truth, it gave her power back. What surprised her most wasn't how fast Ethan vanished. It was how easily she began seeing the cracks she once ignored. Looking back, their love had long been conditional. He loved her when she agreed. When she stayed quiet. When she didn't challenge him. The moment she stood up, even a little, it became inconvenient. His love had limits. Her growth threatened him. And instead of rising with her, he ran. She started therapy. Not to recover from the relationship, but to recover from how it changed her. The way it warped her self-image. The way it taught her to make herself smaller in exchange for temporary peace. Her therapist helped her trace the patterns, how often she ignored her gut, how often she chose loyalty over self-respect. They weren't just Ethan's issues. They were hers too. And that honesty was hard. But it was also freeing. She deleted the photos, cleared the voicemails, threw away the anniversary cards that once felt too sacred to toss. It was painful, but necessary. Healing doesn't happen while clinging to relics of betrayal. She realized she didn't want to preserve memories of a man who could disappear without the decency of goodbye. Sometimes she still woke up expecting to find him in the kitchen. Muscle memory took time to fade. But when that pang hit, she didn't chase it away. She sat with it, then let it pass. Emotions were visitors now, not squatters. One afternoon, she received a message from an unknown number. For a moment, her heart caught in her throat. But it wasn't Ethan. It was one of his friends. A vague, awkward text that said, "Didn't expect him to do it like that. Hope you're okay." She stared at the message for a full minute before deleting it. What was the point? There was no closure to be found through second-hand shame. Ethan didn't care enough to explain himself, and she no longer needed anyone else to explain for him. The pain hadn't disappeared. But something stronger had begun to take root, clarity. Not just about him, but about herself. She realized she had sacrificed so much to keep something alive that wasn't worth saving. Her dreams, her peace, her voice. Now, she was slowly reclaiming all of it. She began journaling again. Not to document pain, but to track growth. Every small win, a boundary kept, a negative thought overcome, a trigger diffused, she wrote it down. Because progress wasn't always loud. It was in the moments she chose herself without guilt. The moments she didn't answer calls out of obligation. The moments she said no without apology. There was no revenge arc. No dramatic makeover. Just small, quiet choices made every day with intention. Healing didn't need to be beautiful or cinematic. It just needed to be real. And real looked like her laughing again without second-guessing how she sounded. Cooking barefoot in the kitchen because she wanted to. Turning up the music and dancing, not for anyone else, but because the moment called for it. For so long, she thought healing would come from understanding Ethan, why he left, how he could be so cruel. But now she saw it clearly. Healing came when she stopped giving her energy to things that refused to love her back. The relationship didn't end the weekend she left. It had been ending for a long time. The only difference was, now she saw it for what it was. She stopped romanticizing the beginning and started being honest about the ending. Some nights were still hard. Loneliness crept in like fog. But she didn't see loneliness as a failure anymore. It was just part of the rebuilding. She wasn't waiting for someone new to fill the space. She was learning how to be whole in it. That was the lesson. She didn't need someone to make her life meaningful. She needed to remember that her life was meaningful all along. Ethan's absence no longer felt like a loss. It felt like the removal of a block she had mistaken for a foundation. And with that block gone, the rebuilding could begin. Stronger. Wiser. On her own terms. It happened quietly, without fanfare. Ava stopped waiting for Ethan to come back. Not physically. Emotionally. She stopped imagining the knock on the door, the text with too late apologies, the dramatic plea for forgiveness. The shift wasn't sudden. It came like dawn, slow but undeniable. She didn't need him to return. She needed him to stay gone. She'd always thought closure had to come from a conversation. The one where he would explain everything, admit fault, and acknowledge her pain. But now she understood, closure wasn't a gift someone handed you. It was a door you shut yourself, whether or not you ever got a reason. She started talking about it openly. Not with sadness. Not with rage. Just with clarity. When someone asked, she told the truth. He left while I was gone for the weekend. No warning, no explanation. Just gone. Some people gasped. Others said things like, I could never survive that. And Ava would nod, but inside she thought, you could. You just don't know it yet. Pain doesn't kill you. But it does strip away everything that isn't essential. And what was left, when all the illusions were gone, was her. Not the version of herself she used to be. Not the version she played for Ethan. But the real one. The one who didn't flinch at silence anymore. The one who no longer begged to be chosen. One morning, she walked past a mirror and caught her own reflection in a way she hadn't in years. There was a stillness to her face that used to be clouded by anxiety. She looked into her own eyes and saw someone steady, someone unshakable. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. It was enough to see herself and not look away. She began doing small things that honored her autonomy. Getting rid of clothes she wore because he liked them. Painting the walls a color he once called too loud. Reclaiming her space one decision at a time. And each time she made a choice for herself, without compromise, it felt like a stitch mending something inside her. She stopped checking his social media. She realized it wasn't curiosity that kept her looking, it was habit. Hope, even in its weakest form, was a dangerous thing. Letting go of that hope was harder than letting go of him. But when she did, it felt like putting down a heavy bag she hadn't noticed she was carrying. She began setting new standards. For herself. For her boundaries. For what she would never tolerate again. She no longer excused red flags as quirks, or rationalized emotional absence as just being tired. She knew the difference now. She had lived it. And the cost of staying silent was too high to ever pay again. Her therapist asked her one day, "What do you want now?" Ava didn't hesitate. Peace. Not perfection. Just peace. Because perfection had been the lie. The perfect marriage. The perfect sacrifice. The perfect smile hiding the ache. Peace was messy, but real. Peace meant she didn't have to prove anything to anyone. Especially not to a man who disappeared instead of speaking the truth. She didn't rush into dating. She didn't crave validation. She craved authenticity. And solitude wasn't lonely anymore, it was safe. She no longer mistook chaos for passion. She no longer equated being wanted with being valued. Then one day, she received divorce papers in the mail. No letter. No signature beyond his name on the dotted line. Just documents and deadlines. And as she held them in her hands, she waited for the wave of grief to crash. But it didn't come. Only relief. Not because it was over. But because she didn't have to wait for it to end anymore. It already had. She signed every page without hesitation. There were no more what-ifs. Only what's next. And that feeling, clean, quiet certainty, was something she hadn't felt in years. Ava called her lawyer, arranged the filing, and then closed the chapter without a ceremony. She didn't tell many people. She didn't cry. She went for a walk, sat on a bench under the setting sun, and felt the weight of old promises finally lift. People talk about moving on like it's a destination. A finish line you cross when you've done enough healing. But Ava learned that moving on wasn't a place. It was a choice made over and over, in 100 tiny ways. Choosing not to chase what hurt you. Choosing not to shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort. Choosing to stay rooted in truth, even when it's uncomfortable. She no longer felt ashamed of what happened. She didn't carry it like a secret anymore. It became part of her, but not all of her. Like a scar that no longer aches, only reminds you of what you survived. And in those reminders she found something unexpected: respect. Not from others. From herself. Because she had faced abandonment, and didn't collapse. She had walked through betrayal and still believed in herself. She hadn't just survived. She had evolved. There was no revenge. No final confrontation. No apology. Just silence. And from that silence she built her strength. No longer defined by what he did to her, but by how she rose after he left. She didn't need him to see her growth. She didn't need to be witness to make it real. Her healing wasn't for show. It was for her. Ava stood on her own. Fully. Finally. And not because she was forced to. But because she chose to. The strange thing about healing is how it sneaks up on you. One day you're crawling out of wreckage, and another day, without realizing it, you're standing tall in a life you built from scratch. That's where Ava found herself now, not just surviving, but steady. And in that steadiness, something new emerged, the urge to reach back and help someone else climb out of what she barely escaped. It started when a coworker mentioned she was thinking of leaving her relationship. Her voice was low, nervous, wrapped in guilt. Ava listened without interrupting. When the woman finally looked up, bracing for judgment, Ava just said, "You're allowed to want more. Needing peace doesn't make you selfish." The woman's eyes welled up, and Ava knew that feeling too well, the weight of someone finally seeing you. Word spread quietly. Friends began texting her. Not about Ethan, but about their own doubts, their own loneliness in the middle of togetherness. Ava didn't give advice like a therapist. She wasn't quoting studies or giving rules. She just spoke from where she had been. Listen to the version of you that whispers. She knows when something's not right. That line stuck. More than once, someone repeated it back to her later. She didn't try to become some relationship guru. She wasn't pretending to have it all figured out. But she understood what it was like to stay too long, to shrink too small, to confuse struggle with love. She knew the silent compromises that slowly hollow you out. And she knew the courage it took to leave without a final blow-up, just a quiet decision to stop accepting less. So she kept telling the truth. When someone said, "But he was good at first," she answered, "So was mine." That's what makes it hard. They show you just enough to keep you hopeful. When someone said, "I don't know who I am without him," she said, "That's because you've spent too long being who he needed, not who you are." One night she posted something simple online. Just a few lines. "He left without warning. And it turned out to be the beginning of the best version of me. If you're in something that's breaking you, know this, peace is real. But it starts with walking away from what isn't." It went further than she expected. Comments poured in. DMs, stories. Women saying thank you. Women saying, "Me too." Women saying, "I'm not ready yet, but I'm close." And Ava replied to everyone she could. Not with empty cheerleading, but with reminders. You're not broken. You're just waking up. You don't need a reason that makes sense to him. You only need one that makes sense to you. She wasn't giving them power, they already had it. She was just helping them see it. The way someone once helped her by simply telling her the truth without trying to fix her. There were hard moments. Stories that mirrored her own too closely. Messages from women who stayed for years in situations worse than hers. Ava didn't pretend to have perfect answers. But she kept showing up. Kept saying what she wished someone had said to her. You don't have to wait until you're falling apart to leave. What surprised her most was how helping others helped her heal deeper. Every time she gave someone language for what they were feeling, it brought clarity to her own story. Every time she heard someone say, "I thought I was the only one," it reminded her how isolation feeds silence. She realized something important then. Her pain wasn't wasted. It became purpose. Not dramatic or loud. Just solid. A foundation she could stand on while reaching back. She wasn't defined by what Ethan did anymore. She was defined by what she did with it. She could have stayed bitter. Could have closed herself off. But instead, she turned the mess into meaning. Not because she had to, but because she wanted the ending to count for something. When a woman told her she finally filed for divorce after years of emotional erosion, Ava didn't say, "Congratulations." She said, "You were brave long before the paperwork." Because she understood, the hardest part wasn't leaving. It was deciding you deserved to. She didn't glamorize it. Healing was unglamorous most days. Grief still arrived in odd moments. Sometimes she'd hear a song or catch a scent and her stomach would twist for a second. But the difference was it passed. It didn't define her anymore. She could feel it without drowning. Her definition of love had changed completely. It wasn't grand gestures or passion fueled by drama. It was consistency. Safety. Feeling seen without performing. And if that meant being alone a little longer, she was okay with that. Because now, she wasn't lonely. She was full of her own presence. The people around her saw it too. The calm in her. The softness that had returned. She laughed more, but it wasn't performative. It was rooted. Grounded. She had come home to herself. She realized one afternoon that she hadn't thought about Ethan in weeks. Not with anger. Not with longing. He had become irrelevant to her narrative. A plot point. Not the plot. And that, she thought, was the real win. Not just healing from the damage, but becoming someone who would never invite it back in. Someone who wouldn't be fooled by empty charm or shallow promises. Someone who had tasted freedom and refused to trade it for anything less than mutual, healthy love. She wasn't bitter. She didn't need revenge. She didn't even need an apology. She had something better. A life she chose. A self she respected. And the strength to help others get there too. Not because she had all the answers, but because she knew one thing for sure. You don't have to stay broken to prove you love deeply. You're allowed to walk away and still be the good one. And most of all, you don't owe anyone your peace. It took a while before Ava realized she had forgiven him. Not because he deserved it. Not because he asked. But because she refused to let him occupy any more space in her life. Forgiveness wasn't a gift to him, it was closure for her. She released the resentment like a final breath she didn't need to hold anymore. She didn't feel sorry for herself. She didn't replay what-ifs. The story had played out exactly as it needed to. He walked away, and in doing so set her free. What once felt like abandonment now looked like deliverance. She wouldn't have left on her own. She would have kept trying. But he made the choice, and she chose to build something better from the ashes. Peace looked different than she imagined. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks. It was her waking up without anxiety, making coffee without rushing, listening to music without associating every lyric with heartbreak. It was lightness. Not because life was perfect, but because her life finally belonged to her. There were still questions she'd never get answers to. Why didn't he talk to her? Why did he choose to leave the way he did? Why disappear without a word after years of shared life? But those questions lost their power. She didn't need to understand his choices. She only needed to honor her own. She stopped measuring her progress and milestones. It wasn't about how fast she moved on. It was about how deeply she rebuilt. She had learned to sit with discomfort without needing to fix it. She had learned to trust her intuition, the voice she used to silence in the name of keeping peace. Now she listened. To herself. To her body. To her instincts. She knew when something didn't feel right, and she acted on it without guilt. She had paid the price of ignoring red flags. She wouldn't make that mistake again. She started dreaming again. Not of romance or redemption, but of travel, of creating, of living boldly without asking for permission. She applied for things she used to think were out of reach. Took solo trips without fear. She started a blog, not to vent, but to share the wisdom she'd earned through fire. People followed. Quietly at first. Then consistently. Her words weren't dramatic. They were real. She talked about detachment, rebuilding trust in yourself, reclaiming joy after loss. She didn't package pain as inspiration. She showed the work. The silence. The rebuilding. And in doing so, she gave others permission to do the same. She wasn't trying to be anyone's savior. But she had learned that healing is contagious. When one person speaks truth without shame, it opens the door for others to do the same. And that was enough for her. Not fame. Not validation. Just knowing that her story no longer weighed her down. It lifted others. Eventually, love did find her again. Not because she was searching, but because she was whole. The kind of love that didn't come with confusion or fear. Someone who didn't flinch at her strength or try to shrink her voice. It was easy in the best way. And slow. No rushing. No trying to impress. Just peace. Just presence. But even if it hadn't come, she would have been okay. That was the real breakthrough. Realizing her life didn't need a romantic resolution to be complete. Love wasn't the reward for healing. The healing itself was the reward. She saw Ethan once, by chance. In a parking lot. They didn't speak. Just a glance that lasted seconds. But in that moment, she felt nothing. No ache. No anger. No desire to confront or explain. Just a quiet knowing, I made it. Without you. Beyond you. It wasn't pride. It was freedom. The kind that comes when your story no longer includes someone who tried to disappear you. The kind that can't be shaken, even by memory. She no longer told the story with a broken voice. She didn't need to defend her pain or justify why she stayed so long. She honored the version of herself that didn't know better. And she celebrated the one who finally did. People often asked her now, "How did you do it?" She never gave them a simple answer. Because there wasn't one. It wasn't one decision. It was hundreds. Saying no when it was easier to say yes. Choosing silence over chasing. Choosing herself over survival. It was looking in the mirror and deciding she mattered, even when no one else acted like she did. It was feeling the sting of rejection and not letting it define her worth. It was standing up for her peace like it was sacred, because it was. She didn't wish him well. But she didn't wish him harm. She wished herself distance. She wished herself clarity. She got both. In the end, her story wasn't about betrayal. It was about becoming. About facing loss and choosing growth. About walking away from what looked like love but felt like emptiness. About building a life so rooted in self-respect that no one could unmake her. She never needed him to come back. She only needed to come home to herself. And she did.